Hello, welcome back to the channel. I'm EVM and this video is all about the massive logistical headache, probably the biggest one that's facing this country when it comes to true mass EV adoption. And that's how do we solve the problem for people who don't have one of these? A home charger. You see, even if the infrastructure is exactly where we need it to be, people look at this as an inconvenience. And I'm about to tell you that if that infrastructure by 2035, which is ultimately when we need it to be in place by, if that infrastructure does exist and it is brilliant and reliable and exactly how we need it to be, it will be more convenient for the majority of people, for the majority of journeys, than filling it with petrol. How can that be when even in the future, nearly 15 years from now, it will take still 20 to 30 minutes to fill up, as it were, compared to the 5 or 10 minutes it does in a petrol car? I get comments every day of the week from people saying, I live in a flat, I like EVs, but I'm not willing to spend 20-30 minutes recharging or refueling when I only spend 5 to 10 now. It's more inconvenient, I have things to do, I have children to pick up, I have work to get to. I just can't see how, well, it will work, but I can't see how it's not going to be more inconvenient for the 40 to 50% of people who apparently won't be able to install one of these very easily. Well, I get that. I can understand it completely, but it is a misconception, and it's all because of a concept which is different to fueling petrol cars called grazing. With a petrol car, you end up refueling on an event-based trigger. The fuel light will come on, or you'll get to a quarter, or whatever it is you normally do, and then you will visit a petrol station and get more petrol. You will refuel based on something happening, in this case, you getting low. But the concept of grazing is very different. So in electric car world, it's not like that. It occasionally will be, don't get me wrong, you know, everything's variable, but for the majority of people on the majority of journeys, you won't have that get to 20%, 10% or whatever and then fill back up again. You will graze. And the whole concept of grazing is based on the infrastructure being in place. So by 2035, this infrastructure needs to be in place where we need it to be, solid and reliable. Otherwise, it won't work. I fully admit that. It's all about the infrastructure. And not big charging hubs, they're part of them, don't get me wrong, but the majority of what I'm about to tell you relies on destination charging. That is the key. Now, the concept of grazing is not a complicated one, but I feel like I need to give you a few scenarios to really show that it is going to be nice and convenient and ultimately different to what you're used to. And it's all about that learning something new, isn't it? People don't like that. It's the path of least resistance. I've always done this. I'm always wanting to do this. Like smartphones, I'm not going to type on a touch screen. Who's going to do that? I want to use a keyboard like I do with my old Nokia and Blackberries. And now fast forward just what, 5-10 years and everybody's using a touch screen to type on. And it's the same sort of battle that we've got with EVs. Anyway, this concept of grazing. Let's imagine I cannot charge it from home. I've got a 200-mile range EV, which in 14 years' time will be, well, the bog standard cheapest EV you can buy easily. Everything's getting better as time goes on. In the last 5 years, ranges have practically doubled. So in another 14-15 years, who knows where we'll be at. But let's imagine I've got a 200-mile range EV and I can't charge from home. That won't be a problem if destination charging is in place. So I'm on, I don't know, 50% right now, 100 miles worth of range. I'm driving to work. That takes 15 miles, say, out of my range. And then, of course, 15 getting back home again. So going to work and back loses me 30 miles. But that car is sat there for 8 hours doing nothing. Absolutely nothing. It's a complete brick. It's just sat there, wasting away. We might as well charge it. We might as well get it doing something. Even on a 3-pin plug socket. We're not talking expensive chargers here. A fast charger would be more than ideal. In that 8 hours, you're pretty much going to have a full tank at the end of it. So if you can charge at work, it will probably be almost as convenient as charging from home, because most people work for 5 days a week and most of the year. So for what, twice a week you charge up at work and then you're done pretty much. But what if you can't charge from work? Because not everybody has that. I go from site to site, for example. You may go to the supermarket on your way back home. Well, all right then, I've got a big shop coming up. That's about an hour. And in that 1 hour, I've used 20 miles there and back getting to the supermarket, say, which is quite far, quite for most people. So I've wasted 20 miles, but I've gained 30, 35 in that 1 hour of stopping at the supermarket. So I've ended up with 10 to 15 miles more range by visiting the supermarket. Go to a restaurant, spend an hour and a half there. If you can charge there, you'll end up getting probably 30, 40 miles more than you've spent getting to the restaurant. Go to the cinema, 3 hours-ish. Certainly on today's films anyway. In that 3 hours, you've got 100 miles worth of range. How far's the cinema from you? 5, 10, 15 miles away? So if everywhere you visit has at least some charging, not literally every parking space, but if it's, again, how we need it to be, the infrastructure, you will end up grazing at each place you come to. Your electric range will do this. You won't wait until it gets empty and then visit a petrol pump equivalent. You'll just stop off and get a little bit of energy everywhere you stop. That's the whole concept of grazing. Most people, again, work 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. You would only need to plug it in for a couple of those days to get hundreds of miles worth of range. So again, it's all based on this destination charging being utterly, utterly key to it all working. We recently went to Chester Zoo, and it's not exactly next door for us, but it wasn't a problem, as I'm about to show you. This is a perfect case in point. I'm here at Chester Zoo. We'll be here for many, many hours. And look, there are 23 charging points here. Now, a lot of people will think, well, if it's 200 miles to Chester Zoo, for example, because people do travel here, well, my car only does 150 miles, or the electric vehicle I'm looking at, so I don't want one. I don't want to have to spend an extra 30, 40 minutes charging, even today, let alone in the future. Well, you won't do, because you'll drive to the zoo, the destination, you'll charge up, and then you'll leave with pretty much a full battery. And that's the whole point. So effectively, I can drive here and back again in a low range EV because I know I can charge whilst I'm doing my thing. I'm losing no time. It's more convenient to do this than stop at a petrol station. That's a perfect example, done properly. Obviously, we've got 14 years for them to literally litter the car park with with many, many chargers. But in today's world, in EV numbers, that's about right. It's brilliant because, as I said in the video, you can charge for hours. You can get tons of range, which, unless you're going up and down the country, should be more than enough. You almost always end up coming back with more than you're left with. And even if you think, well, I'm only spending 15 minutes at a supermarket, well then that's why supermarkets should have rapid chargers as well as lots of fast chargers. So you think, okay, I'm there for 15 minutes, I'll plug it into a rapid charger, and in that 15 minutes, certainly 15 years from now, you're going to end up getting, what, 100, 150 miles worth of range, all for just stopping in at your local supermarket and picking up a few items. So I'm not saying it won't occasionally come up as an inconvenience, and that every single restaurant and every single shop is going to have chargers. But if we get enough of them, if the government have incentives and grants and really push it and make it easy for people to install them, it can work and work really, really well. We need to put these chargers where they make sense. Most people have probably seen what is typically 2 rapid chargers on the electric highway at IKEA stores. Now, they were put in many years ago as part of a green thing that IKEA were doing, but ultimately they're the stupidest chargers in the world because they're in the wrong place. I mean, a rapid charger even today is probably done in most EVs after anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes. And if you're going to that store and not just using it to charge up en route, who can do IKEA in 20 minutes or even 30 or even 40? Pretty much everybody who shops at IKEA and plugs in, the car's finished way before they are. So then somebody else turns up, sees a car that's finished charging, and is blocking the charge point and then gets angry. So that is the worst example, really, because it's in the wrong place. It's all right having a few rapid chargers, but it's the fast chargers that what they should have put in, because 30 fast chargers, which is probably the equivalent price of just a couple of rapid chargers, would be far more effective in a place that people spend an hour or 2 or 3 in. Getting the right destination chargers in the right places is again key to all this happening. If you have what they call a park and rides, lots of fast chargers, because the idea of park and ride is that you'll be there for many hours. Rapid chargers, you want some, because there might be people that need to just have a quick top up, they're on an onwards journey, but ultimately we need to get the ratio correct. So there's a lot of things that need to happen. I'm not naive to the big challenge that's coming up here in terms of getting this all in place, but it has to happen. Otherwise, those that cannot charge from home will have the worst experience that they're worried about. I mean, let's face it, you've got almost 14 years before the new car sales of plug-in hybrids, which effectively is a petrol engine, before they get banned. So unless you plan on buying a new car in 2035 or 2036, you're going to have over 15 years before it's a problem for you. 15 years ago doesn't sound like a long time, but it is. Smartphones literally didn't exist back then, or in concept form maybe. And now look, everybody's got one. You can get one for 50 quid and it'll stream 4K Netflix. It's this patience that I think we need to just get a bit more of. No one's forcing you into an EV. You don't have to get one today. It's a choice, and I would always personally prefer to jump when I choose to, as opposed to when you're pushed. But there's still a lot of time. There's going to be, let's face it, 20 years before you have to get an electric vehicle, before the used market for petrol gets to the point where you can't find the car that's suitable for you. There's many variables, and of course travelling salesmen, you know, the people that do hundreds of miles a day, yes, then you're going to probably have a slightly more inconvenient journey until something truly quick turns up in EV world in terms of charging. I don't see a way around that. Hopefully by now you'll go, all right, I kind of get it. If I could charge up everywhere I stopped, then I won't have to fill up. The car is refueling when you're doing stuff, getting on with your life. And let's face it, petrol stations are not a nice place to visit. It's not convenient, just because after decades and decades of doing it, we're used to it. Your hands stink. There's always some muppet doing a full shop whilst they're filling up with petrol at the same time, and you sat there going, oh, for God's sake. It's not convenient, and your 5-10 minutes you have to spend with your car. You have to stand there holding that nozzle, waiting for it. It's 10 minutes out of your life you're never getting back. I'd rather go to a supermarket, plug in, and then walk off, because I was going to the supermarket anyway, so therefore the net loss from my time out of my life is almost zero. It's more convenient for me. You just have to make sure, well, not you, but the UK and the world has to make sure that these chargers are in place. I think supermarkets will happen. They're not stupid. They want people to visit them. So that's already happening now, and it'll just get bigger and bigger. I've seen one supermarket, I think, with 48 chargers in it. So yeah, that's just a matter of time. But the restaurants will be tough. You know, council car parks should be easy. Retail car parks should be easy. Again, that's happening in a lot of them already. So it's all about getting back what you used, or more, getting to your destination and back. As I said, just like if you go to the cinema, just like if you go to a restaurant, you end up coming back with more than you're left with. So that's the whole concept. There are many variables, there are many exceptions. You'd have to tell me them all. I get that. It will not be for every journey. But if the majority of your journeys are more convenient and some are less, it balances out. I still think it will have the tipping point towards the EV, again, once everything's in place. But, oh, shut up. But for now, you know, it's just going to take time. Remember, we're at the relatively early adopter stage still. It doesn't have to suit every single person today. They're too expensive for a lot of people. If you can't charge from home, I probably wouldn't own one. I suppose you could almost test this concept. Imagine you couldn't charge your phone at home for whatever reason. If you plugged in at work each day, or whenever you fancied, if you then plugged in at the supermarket when you were there, if you plugged in at the restaurant when you were at the restaurant, at the cinema when you were at the cinema, you probably wouldn't need to charge this at home, would you? You'd have to get used to the fact that you would be setting off in the morning with 20-30%, but ultimately you'd never run out of charge. Unless, of course, you stayed at home for many days, and that's why the analogy kind of falls down. But when you're not using the EV, it's not really losing anything, maybe 1% a week. So yeah, it's not the best analogy, but you get my point. If you plug in everywhere else you visit, you won't need to at home. So hopefully this whole video, the whole idea of the grazing concept has allayed a few fears. There's still going to be plenty of ifs and buts, but the big if it is in place, all the charges, then it's fine. It's going to be fine. Well, I think I'm done. People who were members got to watch this video a week early. They got to listen to the podcast early, and there are members-only videos as well. Just click on the join button next to subscribe, and it costs from 99p. Just less than £1 a month for all this extra Netflix-beating content. Either way, thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you soon.